Geordie Journos at an unusual setting. Sunderland's Academy of Light. Myself and Liam have just been watching Newcastle United under-21s claim a Tyne-Wear derby win over Sunderland under-21s 3-2. You enjoy the game, Liam?
Yeah, I did actually. Nice. Feels summery, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've still got my winter jacket on, but
yeah, nice. A little bit wind, so apologies if you do get them. We've got the fancy fuzzy mics here just in case you can actually hear all of this time. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. My eyes, particularly today, were focused on what I could see from Alfie Harrison. Of course, he was the only real January transfer window signing for the club, and obviously has had a lot of social media talk and a lot of fan excitement. And from the little flashes I've seen today, he's a clever player. Played as one of the midfield three, you would say. Maybe he's more advanced in a very similar system to what Eddie Howe ideally deploys. And looks very tidy on the ball, found good spaces, moves it quite quickly, and I was reasonably impressed with him. I think the standout player from the academy kids today for me would have been Cathal Heffernan. I thought he had an excellent game at centre half. One little wobble in the second half, scored a lovely header though to put Newcastle United 2-1 up, and I think it was a decent game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. A bit nervous at the end. Newcastle were 3-1 up, then Sunderland score in the 95th minute, and there's 10 minutes added on time, so it was a bit of backs against the wall.
Drama.
Yeah, it was a good game, and Sunderland had 6 first-team players, according to some of our Sunderland Echo colleagues who were sat.
Some of them played in the first. Did a couple of them not play, or one of them played in the first-team derby? Did it not?
Yes, it was the guy who got dispossessed by Almiron.
Was it a fullback?
Yeah. But yeah, 6 first-team players. One of Sunderland's goal scorers, Corey Evans. Great goal, to be fair to him. 33 years old. So yeah, it was a really good win actually by Newcastle's under-21s, and I think I thought Heffernan was really good. Obviously, a rival from AC Milan in the summer, and Alfie Harrison as well, who's coming from Manchester City. He, for 18, 19 years old, he looks lively. He's got about the pitch really well and has a good turn of pace and a swagger about him that I think is certainly promising in terms of could he make that next step up to the first team in the years to come.
There was parallels with the first team in some ways. In the second half, I counted, I think, about 6 or 7 occasions when Newcastle United players went down injured. Yes. And they seemed to be dropping like flies and being taken off left, right and centre.
Yeah.
There was a few walking wounded, and I think 3 or 4 of them limped out of the game, didn't they?
Yeah.
So yeah, some strange parallels with the first team.
Yeah, hopefully they're not so bad. But yeah, one of the reasons we're here today was to actually make a video. We've touched on the under-21s game, but I'm sure you want to hear our thoughts on Newcastle United at the moment during this international break. They're currently in Dubai for warm weather training. And Liam, where do you want to start in terms of Newcastle United at the moment? Because it's been tough the past couple of months. Definitely.
It has. I mean, we'll put a bit of a call to action out, didn't we, with regards to what people wanted us to talk about in one of these videos. And I think, as well as the season in general, one of the talking points was Bruno Guimaraes, wasn't it? And what people think will happen with his future. But where do I think things stand at the moment? I think it's been a struggle. I don't really see my concern with the last 10 games.
14 points in 14 games.
Yeah, the last 10, if they continue in that manner, they'll finish where they are, realistically. I don't think there's much argument to that. I do believe there needs to be some kind of upturn in performance and results to get anywhere close to being in that mix. You look at the next 2 home games, and the West Ham one for me is a must-win. It's as much a must-win as Wolves and Chelsea. And then Everton, of course, you'd want a bare minimum of 4 points from that sequence of games. The fixture list isn't too unkind to Newcastle United for the final few weeks of the season. But it hasn't always been those games where they've profited in recent times. I actually thought there's been a lot of negativity post Man City, and I actually find it a bit baffling in some ways, because I think the only people who were truly devastated or surprised by that result, in my opinion, were people who probably had their head in the clouds anyway.
Yeah, thought they'd have a chance.
Yes, yeah. I think that was probably the only people, and I seen some of it on social media and was quite baffled by it. Maybe I was just seeing the wrong kind of people on social media. I'm not sure.
It can skew views, can't it?
But I very much think there was an expectation of a level of performance and a result that I thought Newcastle, in its minor victories, I thought they weren't as bad. I think they were much better than they were against Chelsea, against better opposition. I actually thought in moments, in certain ways that they played, they were probably better than they were against Wolves, which wasn't an amazing performance despite it being a really good result. I think there's signs there, and I've got to say, I'm less inclined today than I was a week or month or so ago to really put the emphasis on the manager, because I do think he has tried things, and I think the theory behind the 5 and being compact was the right thing to do at Manchester City. And one of my biggest frustrations with Eddie Howe, I would say, has been him not really showing any willing to break from the mould. And in showing willing, that almost answers a little question to me, is that he can do it and has been working on it. So I thought that was reasonably positive. There was a lot of negatives to go with it, though. It was a little bit of a surrender when you look at the stats. I think they probably could have got a couple more shots off.
Yeah.
They got themselves in good positions and didn't quite finish things off. Alexander Isak had an off day in front of goal. Got in an amazing position in the second half, and you just never know. But I did feel if Newcastle had scored, I think Man City probably would have went up the levels.
Yeah.
And got themselves another one. But that's the opposition. That's why I found it quite baffling that anybody could be so devastated. It is another year without a trophy, and it is the wider picture is how long does this go on? But really, it was kind of expected. An away game at Manchester City, you could almost put any team in world football against Manchester City, and they're underdogs at Man City. So a 2-0 defeat in which, you could say they didn't lay a glove statistically, but, they had moments in the game, which I think was better than Chelsea.
Yeah, they were okay. I thought, it was very similar to the game they played down at the Etihad in August, where Manchester City were comfortable. Newcastle were never out of the game, but they never felt in the game, really, either, where it was... They'd have moments where they'd play a bit of nice football in and around the halfway line, and then when it came to the final third, offered very little. So yeah, I think it was a textbook Man City defeat for Newcastle United. But you touch on the sort of flexibility Eddie Howe's shown. Do you think he needs to show more of that in these final 10 games if Newcastle are going to salvage the season and make it something worthwhile by the end of it?
Yeah, so one of my biggest frustrations, I would say, has been the lack of flexibility, and it's almost been what you want to do, in my opinion. Again, I haven't got any coaching badges, but just managing a team, you would kind of want to show its strengths rather than its weaknesses. And I think too often the system hasn't married together with the personnel particularly well, and it's almost shown flaws in players rather than look, for example, in a much more compact, tighter 5, the flaws of Sven Botman were not shown. He wasn't ran and was out chasing everybody back. I think he maybe had 1 or 2 moments, but it wasn't every other attack.
Yeah.
And it was the same for Dan Burn. In a more compact system, it didn't show the players' flaws, and that's been my biggest frustration, particularly with the midfield, is that if you've got an injured Sean Longstaff, as we now know, and a Lewis Miley who isn't suited to being a Joe Linton 8, then why do you play them in those roles and expect the same result from those players? That's probably been one of my biggest frustrations. So to see that tactical flexibility is a positive. We still need to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
My biggest thing, I think, probably between now and the end of the season is when Lewis Miley comes back in the team. I think he'll have benefited from going back out. I'd like to see him brought back in at some point as well, and I think we'll see a real injection of quality. I think he'll be a better player for coming back out and being able to just relax into doing half an hour here, 20 minutes there. Elliot Anderson's going to be a big one. I feel heartily sorry for him this season to have gotten the injury that he got. I feel like this was his year, and to an extent Miley wouldn't have got the chances he did.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And you can often in football have these sliding doors moments, and I really hope that isn't one for Elliot Anderson.
Yeah.
Because I would argue, in terms of the type of players that have come through Newcastle's academy in recent years, you would rank Sean Longstaff's made a really good career for himself for the level of player that he is.
Yeah.
I would argue talent-wise, Elliot Anderson's a level above that again, and Miley has got the potential to be better than that again. But will Anderson fulfil that? He needs to stay fit. The lad
it's all about circumstance, isn't it? And I think Sean Longstaff and Lewis Miley this season have sort of benefited from the circumstances when they were at a certain age to sort of progress and reach the levels they've had. And then, okay, Sean Longstaff has struggled at times this season playing through injury, but let's not forget he scored 6 goals. He started the season. He was your man.
He was my man, and I stand by that I think he started the season really well. Thought he was excellent last season. It just showed when you took Sean Longstaff out of the team, it didn't quite function the way that it functioned before.
Yeah.
And that's partly the thing, again, that you see a lot of on social media is we miss Joe Linton so much. It was Joe Willock so much. Who is it next? It isn't an individual's game. Newcastle do miss parts of that game. They miss the physicality of Joe Linton. But it isn't all about Joe Linton. I think there's ways and means, and this falls on a manager, that you can lose a player, any player in this team, and then you have to adapt to to see what you've got on, what have I got here, and how do I get the best out of what I've got, rather than stick to my formula and the way I think it should work. Of course, everybody in an ideal world would have a formula and say, that's in an ideal world, that's how I want my team to play with this personnel. It doesn't always work like that. I think they do miss certain players, but I think it's important that people don't think it's the be all and end all. That I think if you transplanted Joe Linton straight back into this team, it does not turn Newcastle United from being a mid-table team into a top 6 team. It just doesn't do it. Same goes for Sandro Tonali. Sandro Tonali plus Joe Linton plus Bruno Guimaraes was a dysfunctional midfield at the start of this season.
Yeah.
So I don't see why anybody with there's no evidential there's no evidential evidence. Not me trying to be too much of a smart ass. There is no evidence. There is no evidence to suggest put Sandro Tonali back into that midfield and Newcastle are transformed. There is no evidence to suggest. There's more evidence to suggest that Joe Linton makes an impact, of course. But I just think people have got to be careful about building up false idols in many ways, particularly in that midfield. That I think it was the midfield became so much more functional when Sean Longstaff was brought back in. The Sean Longstaff at the start of the season and not the one limping around now, carrying an injury clearly. But yeah, going back to the point where Anderson, I think I hope it's not his sliding doors moment, because I really rate the player. And I hope he can have a big impact. This is a big 10 games for him. I feel like he's coming on the pitch and trying too hard at the moment. I think he knows the gravity of this situation and knows that this was his year, and he'll be a frustrated lad because he knew this was his time to make an impact. Hasn't been able to because of just a really unfortunate injury. You can't help a growth spurt and a problem with your back. You just can't. There's not really much you can do about it. So I hope it's a big 10 games for him. I really do. I'd like to see him give an opportunity. But yeah.
Just moving on, just with us being watching the under-21s today and talking about academy players such as Sean Longstaff, Lewis Miley, Elliot Anderson, that's obviously such an important part of PSR and can you get players out the door? Almost, it's wrong that you're almost encouraged to sell top academy products to try and generate that transfer spending freedom, if you like. But do you think that's something Newcastle have to really sort of work on? And almost, do you look at Sean Longstaff, Elliot Anderson, Lewis Miley as players Newcastle may even have to sell further down the line? It's
the system that's wrong, isn't it? I would absolutely hate to see Miley go for 30 million or something, I don't know, values. And it works so much wiggle room because he's worth 0 on the books.
Yeah.
In terms of PSR calculations anyway. It's the system that's wrong, because I would hate that. I would hate to see him go on and become the player that he's got potential to be somewhere else, all for a short-term fix of a summer transfer window.
Yeah, that's
the problem with PSR, and it's a problem with the new system and the old system, and it's protecting the elites. I think we should do. Now I started talking about this. I think we should do this with Jordan.
Yeah.
Later this week, I think we should do. Let me know in the comments what you think. But I think we should do an opinion. We should do our own opinions on PSR and what we think it holds for the future. It's wrong. The system's wrong. That's my take on it. I think it would be so painful. Obviously, it's relevant today because we're talking about young players who can make a big impact. I mean, you wouldn't. Let's be brutally honest about this. And there isn't a stack of You wouldn't say there's millions of pounds worth out on that pitch there today.
But there's a good example of Manchester City have basically let Newcastle have Alfie Harrison for no transfer fee, but if he makes first team appearances, if Newcastle sell him on, Manchester City stand to make millions. So it's a player like that who probably one of dozens in Manchester City's academy, let's be honest, who they've just allowed to join Newcastle, but then have that finger in the pie, if you like, the potential to make money. And I think Man City, Chelsea are probably the perfect examples of that just are able to churn out decent quality young players and
it's a problem.
Prop up their spending.
It's a problem when Newcastle United's academy, and Newcastle United should have the premier academy in North East football. There shouldn't really be anybody able to rival Newcastle United from all the way here down in the Midlands and all the way up to Glasgow. There shouldn't be anybody be able to take players away from them. But consistently, players have been taken away. There's a centre forward I think he was at Sunderland here. There's a centre forward at Everton just coming through. There's two at Liverpool. There's players everywhere. One at Manchester United who was at Newcastle. Yeah. There's too many even just around the fringes, and that isn't stopping. That's still happening now. It needs to stop. But you have to have a functioning academy. It has to be somewhere where people want to come. Yeah. Newcastle's biggest problem is even teams outside Aston Villa have a conveyor belt of footballers come through. They have established themselves as the academy of Middle England. Yes. They take everybody in and around that Birmingham area. Of course, it's 1 million plus people in a city like that. It's a huge conurbation with all the bits around it. But they own that area and produce £100 million footballers. Yeah. Jack Grealish might be a one-off, but they always have good quality footballers coming through. They always consistently have, you look at the FA Youth Cup, things like that, always consistently Aston Villa perform really well in it. And look at the rest of the top six. Tottenham are a conveyor. They have players galore from London. Yeah. Arsenal have always produced players. Manchester United always produce players, even though that is a dysfunctional club. Yeah. They still produce footballers, as we're seeing now in the team. Then beyond that, Chelsea have cornered the market in how to build an academy and how to produce a conveyor belt which is conducive to PSR rules, so that Chelsea will not function as a football club this summer unless they sell players before the end of this financial year, effectively. And it won't function next year either unless they sell 2 or 3 more. And it's how far does that conveyor belt go on? Yeah.
We're going to get 28 million for Lewis Hall, but that's probably another video for another time.
It probably is, yeah. Who I thought, he was one of the brighter spots at Man City. So, but until Newcastle United could compete in any way, shape or form, and it's a blank canvas. There's no reason why. We're here at Sunderland. There's no reason why Sunderland should be taking players from Newcastle United. Yes, it is probably a closer route to first team football here, which is one of the benefits. You see, like Chris Riggs staying here, who's Newcastle fan, family Newcastle daft by all accounts, wants to stay at Sunderland because there's a route to first team football, and it's best for his development at the moment. Funny thing about that is he probably would have got minutes at Newcastle United. Despite his tender age, he probably would have got minutes, such has been the situation. But yeah, until Newcastle United can compete in that respect, then it just becomes, it's problematic. They seem to be going about some of it the right way. I don't know the ins and outs. I like the idea of cherry picking from the top 6 academies and taking maybe slight outliers in teams who've got potential and taking risks. I think they've got to be brave and bold in that respect. But the most important part of this is your 12, 13, 14-year-olds. They can't be allowed to, in 3-4 years' time, be playing for Chelsea and Man City and coming through at Manchester United. Newcastle have got to own this area, in my opinion, and it starts by making sure that they beat the likes of this club, where we're at Sunderland now, to the key names. And traditionally Middlesbrough have always had a better setup and academy, and it's about making sure that Newcastle United gets up to those levels. Yeah.
That investment is needed, because while you can put a lot of money in it as well, it doesn't count in the PSR calculation.
5 years' time, you're better off having 2 kids come out of the academy than having to spend 100 million on 2 players.
Yeah, exactly. And any investment the club makes into that, it's not taken into account into the 105 million losses. So, yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about? We've focused on the academy, which we weren't necessarily planning. We just sort of.
We'll have to work out
this video.
But I think it'd be quite good. I think people were asking about Bruno and what they think of the future. I think it'd be quite nice if you guys think. Let me know in the comments. It'd be good to do a video of the 3 later in the week, where we nail our colours to the mast on what we think the future of certain players holds, and also talk more about the idea of whether PSR should go in the bin or whether it's right. I mean, there is a case to say that, if you open the doors to everybody, I think Manchester City would rule English football for the next 30 years, because they would just outspend everybody.
Yeah.
So there is a case to say, you know, you've got to keep certain limits on things, but they're only going to get bigger and produce more money. So that could happen anyway, organically.
Yeah.
So who knows?
There's also a case, I mean, probably for the video in a few days' time, where you look at Nottingham Forest, Everton, 4 points and 6 points deduction. The Newcastle just go absolutely all out. Like as people initially thought they might have when the takeover happened, and just go, right, we'll take a 6 point deduction, because if it means we'll have a super team who then in a couple of years' time will be competing right at the top.
So yeah, you accept you'll finish. You accept you'll finish further down. No, I think it's all linked anyway. I think it's almost an impossible situation to find themselves in, and I think for me, and I'll make this point in more depth on Thursday or Friday whenever I do this video. For me, nothing's changed, but it feels like everything's changed. And the only thing that's changed isn't really the rules of football, because these almost stricter ones that feel like they're coming in the summer have largely been there anyway. There isn't a massive change to the way things are going on.
If you want to be in Europe, it's the same rules.
Yes, of course.
Newcastle have had to adhere to this season, being in the Champions League.
Essentially, the only thing that's changed is perception. So it's gone from the idea as we are there and we're literally knocking on the door, to suddenly, actually, we're not knocking on the door, because the club as a whole, which hasn't changed, it's going in the right direction, but it'll just take a bit longer than I think everybody's patience at the moment is allowing. I think there's been a realisation. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned fan base wise, I would hope, and within particularly in the dugout, there needs to be lesson learned in certain respects, but that's another argument altogether.
Aye. So yeah, do you want to wrap it up there?
Yeah, you know what I do. Like, comment, share, subscribe. We'll see how this video does. It's not going to be, you know, it's a bit of a want to keep you going, because I know these international breaks can feel a bit long, but we'll keep a few videos coming just to keep things taking over. You know what I do. Click the bell, like, comment, share, subscribe for all your Geordie Journos content.